District Court's again in session.
All right, thank you. If we could please have the jurors brought in, I think they're lined up.
All right.
Like Miss Lake has a hot toddy.
Here's all President Counter for your honor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. We just concluded our lunch recess. Ms. Gilbert is on the stand under direct examination at this time, the state continuing. And I will remind the witness you're still under oath for your testimony. With that, once you're ready, Ms. Blake, you can proceed with your continuing direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Gilbert, I think we left off. I'd ask you if Chad or Lori provided you any details regarding how Lori's daughter died.
No,
And you talked about going to clean a house. Was that Emma's house?
that was Emma's house when we took meals to her and she'd gotten quite sick. And so I'd gone to clean her house and for her.
At some point, did you learn that Lori's children were missing?
I did learn, let's see, I believe it was in November, I learned that they were missing. And I learned who their mother was and that she was married to Chad. So my husband and I called Chad and asked him, are these her children that are missing? And he said that, yes, that it was a custody battle and that when everything came out, it would be fine.
And would this have been after Chad and Lori had told you of their plans to get married?
Yes, I think it was after they were married.
And after that visit in late October, early November, where both Chad and Lori were present, did you learn whether or not Chad was still in Idaho?
He was still in Idaho when they came to visit us. And then it's when I cleaned Emma's house, I believe. And that's when she told me they had gotten married.
Did you learn where Chad had gotten married?
Yes,
And where was that?
in Hawaii.
After his marriage, did Chad ever come to your residence again?
Yes, he came and showed us wedding pictures of their wedding there in Hawaii, and was quite excited to show us his wedding pictures.
And do you recall approximately how much time had passed between he and Lori's first visit to your house and then that second visit when they were married?
I think it was 2 weeks.
Were you surprised to see wedding photos?
Yes,
And why were you surprised?
I was surprised they'd got married so early. I was really surprised when they had told me they didn't know when or how, but then I was surprised that it was so early.
And you were friends with Tammy, right?
Yes.
At some point after that visit, when Chad and Lori showed you the wedding photos, did Chad come to your residence again?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
He came after Lori was arrested in Hawaii, and he had moved back to Idaho. And he came and asked if he could, first asked if he could, I think it was when her first bond was going to come up. And that's when he asked us if we would put our house up for her bond.
Oh my.
And prior to asking for you to put up the bond, do you recall if he ever asked if he could live with you?
Yes, he did.
And what did you tell him?
Well, first y- it was like an overnight, if he could be overnight. And, and I was okay with an overnight, but I could not let him live with us. So we told him that our daughter was going to move in and there wouldn't be any room.
And then he'd ask you to consider putting up some bond money or putting up your property. Is that correct?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. We're getting a little leading.
Sustain.
And I think you had previously indicated that he asked you about bond. Do you
Yes.
recall what he asked you in relation to that?
When he came in, he was quite upset, and he said he had to get her out of jail, and that he cried and he said it was just killing her to be in jail, and could we put our house up for bond? And we asked him if he had family that could help him. He said no. And he mentioned another friend, I think. He said he couldn't help him. And we said we would think about it, and I think that was a Saturday. Sunday, we got a text from him, and he wanted to bring the bondswoman to our home and to meet her at our house that Sunday.
And did you in fact have another conversation with Chad about posting bond or putting your property up?
Yes, there was 2 conversations. This was the first one.
And what did you ultimately end up deciding?
No.
During your conversation with Chad regarding the bond, do you recall anything about the comment previously made about Lori's daughter dying coming up?
Yes, because I asked him, how many daughters does Lori have? And he said 1. And I said, well, when we met you, you told me she had a daughter that passed away. And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, yes, you did. And then when I asked him about the missing children, and he said it was a custody battle. So that's why I asked, how many daughters does she have? And then he denied telling me that.
Did you learn the name of Lori's daughter?
I only learned not through him. I didn't.
Have you since heard the name Tylee?
Yes,
Do you recall specifically talking to Chad about Tylee?
I did. When he asked about the bond, I was a little miffed that he had asked that. And so I thought, I'm asking you some questions. So I asked him, where are the children? And I asked him, where's Tylee? I said, she's a teenager. So I said, doesn't she want a life? And come out and say, I'm the missing girl. I want a job and a life and a boyfriend. And he just said, she didn't like people and she didn't like me.
Did something stick out about those statements?
He said, didn't.
So he used the past tense.
He did.
And backing up a little bit, do you recall a time in February of 2019 when Chad was at your residence?
Yes, he had come over. We were working on a bedroom floor and he came over, and as he was leaving, that's when he mentioned that he had a vision or such that Tammy was going to pass away. He didn't know how or when, but before her 50th birthday.
And do you recall around that same time Chad saying anything about Tammy and games on a computer?
Yes, he had told my husband and I that Tammy liked to play some games on the computer, and that he had told her that her grandmother, I think, but she was dead, had come to him and told him to tell her that she was not happy with Tammy on the computer, that she was wasting her time on the computer.
When Chad made the comment about Tammy going to die, did Tammy have any health issues that you were aware of?
No, in fact, I kind of just passed it off. I didn't really take it serious, honestly, because she wasn't.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
He's a manipulative control freak. You know, and then telling your dead grandma not to let
I
her
have
play
no further
video
questions, Your
games.
Honor.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, cross-examination.
Patient prior.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Gilbert, can you tell me how often on a weekly basis you would see Tammy Daybell?
We had our meetings on Wednesday mornings, and then I would see her on Sunday.
At church?
Yeah.
So, and how long were the meetings on Wednesday morning?
Oh, an hour to 2 hours.
Okay, and how many people were present at that meeting when you would see her for those Wednesday meetings?
There were 4 of us.
Okay, and that was about for 2 hours?
That was the longest.
Okay, that was a long meeting?
That was the longest we went.
Oh, the longest you go. Okay, and then as far as church is concerned, did you sit next to each other at church?
No, sometimes in our second meeting, we sat by each other because it was our presidency, but not in the first meeting.
Okay, so church would last about how long on a Sunday?
2 hours.
Okay. So you would see her for about 3 to 4 hours a week?
Yeah.
Would that be fair? Okay. And then after the birth of Emma's child, the Daybell family would sit at the back of the church. Is that right? You recall that?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
World.
So the location of where they would sit, generally, do you recall that they would sit in the front of the church in the beginning?
Not quite in the front, maybe the middle.
Okay. And then after Emma's child was born, they would, out of respect, they'd
Sometime,
move to
yeah.
the back. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, do you have any recollection of Chad spending mornings at the Salem church every morning with his truck parked up there?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
Do you have any information about Chad parking his truck up at the Salem church every morning
On Sunday morning?
every morning? during
Oh,
the-
no,
during
I
the
have
week?
no idea every
Okay.
morning.
And you do understand that Tammy's family was from Springville, right?
Yes.
And so it wouldn't have been particularly unusual for Tammy to have a service in Springville out of respect to her family over there, correct?
No, and I didn't.
Okay. You made mention of something about our presidency, and my notes say Bishop provided a meal. Talk to me about that a
Mhm.
little bit.
So the 4 of us in our Relief Society presidency, and I had contacted the bishop, and he wanted to be part of that. So us three sisters now in the Relief Society provided the meal, and the bishop included in on that.
And then my notes say the 26th of October is the date that Chad mentioned that he met Lori when he was talking with you, and he mentioned that he met Lori Vallow at a conference in St. George, Utah.
Right.
And that was sometime in very late of 2018, right?
I believe that conference was
Okay.
in 2018.
And you mentioned that the way you knew Lori Vallow was through a person by the name of Melanie Gibb.
Right.
And you know Melanie Gibb as someone who's deeply involved in the Preparing the People movement and those sort of organizations, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence. Counsel's testifying.
Sustained.
How do you know Melanie Gibb?
I think, I don't know how we came upon her podcast, and I was trying to remember how we knew of her podcast. But I didn't know Lori, and so we just wanted to listen to Melanie's.
Okay.
And then that's where I heard of Lori, is through on her podcast.
So did you know of Melanie through the fact that she had a podcast, or did you know her through her participation in the Preparing the People movement?
I just knew her through the podcast.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, you mentioned that Chad talked to you about taking all of the kids to Disneyland. Is it possible they said Knott's Berry Farm?
I heard Disneyland.
Okay. Okay. Have you been to Chad's house?
Yes.
Okay. And is it fair to say that it's a one-story house?
There's an addition
There we go.
to the house.
Right.
You walk through a breezeway, and then there's stairs that goes up.
Right. And when you say an addition, it's more of a building that's.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Witness has already said.
Sustained.
Okay. Are you aware that attachment to the back of the house doesn't have any electric?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware that the attachment to the house that build on doesn't have any heat?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Facts not in evidence. Move to strike.
Sustained. Mr. Pryor, it's got to be questioning, not just testimony through your question.
Well, Judge, I'm asking her if she's aware.
Well, I know, but there's a proper way to do that with facts from the witness, not from you.
Do you, have you been in that addition that's attached to the house?
I have.
Okay. Do you have any information about what utilities are available in that building?
I don't. I didn't look
Okay.
at that
Okay.
part.
And are you aware that nobody uses that?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying or attempting to testify. Move to strike.
Sustained.
Do you have any knowledge about any of the family members utilizing any of that portion of the addition?
I knew that Garth had a ham radio set up, and I think a drum set. up
Okay.
there. I don't know on their living conditions.
Okay. Were you aware of their living conditions in the primary residence?
I just knew of where Tammy's room was at.
Okay. And that's Chad's room as well?
I assume so.
Okay. And then in the other bedroom would be whose room?
I don't know which rooms the kids, whose room was what.
Okay. At the time of Tammy's passing, do you know who was living in the residence at the time?
I believe Garth was.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm not sure if Seth was or not.
Okay.
He could have been.
Okay. And then obviously you previously mentioned something about Emma living kitty corner from the house, right?
Right. And then Mark was coming home from his mission, so he would have lived there, but
Okay.
not yet.
And the other daughter lives somewhere in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you indicated that Chad openly spoke to you about the Disneyland, discussed it with you openly, right?
Yeah, just that they were going to take the kids to Disneyland.
Okay, so at around the time of October, when I believe these discussions were in October, right?
Right.
He wasn't trying to hide his whereabouts in any way, was he?
He didn't with us.
And he wasn't trying to conceal where he was going on trips and vacations, correct?
No, Not with us, he didn't.
And he openly discussed with you his plans for the future, correct?
That he was going to go to Hawaii and write a book.
Okay. And did you get the impression from Chad when he was talking about the children, that he felt the children were still alive?
I didn't know of missing children then.
Okay, well, that wasn't really my question. My question was, at the time he was talking to you about the children, did
wait,
she,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's okay. I mean, I know this is nerve-wracking.
I'm
And
not sure which time.
Okay, it's okay. But at the time, you've had discussions with Chad about the children. Based on his demeanor, did you get the impression that he felt the children were still alive?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
I I felt like he was avoiding it. I didn't get I couldn't get a straight answer.
Okay. So when he told you that when the truth comes out and that you felt it was a custody case, that didn't give you the impression that when the truth came out, it was a custody case, that the children's whereabouts would be told to everybody?
That's what he told me, but I
Okay.
was confused.
Okay,
from
it's
the other-
okay. Judge, that's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect.
They told her the daughter was dead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you have any idea where Chad went every morning?
I have no idea.
And you didn't talk about that, right?
No, I do know that because we didn't leave our home every morning, so I asked, sometimes we saw his vehicle wasn't there, so I think I asked him where he did go. He said he went to the college,
So not the church, but the college.
to the library.
And you've been in the Daybell residence, correct?
Right.
And you talked about there are stairs in that residence?
There is to that addition.
Judge, I'm going to object. Mischaracterization.
Overruled.
So at least all of the residence is not one story. Is that fair?
Right.
And you were asked about Chad sharing with you his plans for the future. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And his plans for the future, as far as what he told you, were what again?
that he was going to Hawaii, but they did talk about marriage, but they didn't know when or where.
So the plans included going to Hawaii,
Mhm.
correct?
Right,
And the plans also included marrying Lori Vallow.
right.
When Chad first mentioned Lori's daughter, again, he referred to her as dead.
Judge, I'm going to object. There's not only is it leading,
Overruled.
He did. As I was asking her about her husband, and he mentioned that she just had a daughter that had passed.
So from that conversation, Chad knew or believed one of Lori's children was dead.
Yeah.
Are you aware that Lori's children were found on Chad Daybell's property?
Judge,
Yes.
objection.
Grounds.
It's now I'll withdraw, Judge, at this point. That's fine.
Are you aware Lori's children's remains were found on Chad Daybell's property?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
All right, that will conclude the testimony then of this witness. Does the state have any intention of a recall of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Will the defense intend to recall her or have her brought in your case in chief, Mr. Pryor?
No, Judge, I don't think so.
Okay, then you are released from any subpoena. Court appreciates your testimony and appearing for trial. You may go ahead and step down. Thank you.
They lied to me.
All right, the state can call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state will call Todd Gilbert.
Very well.
All right.
Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, at this time, then the witness has been sworn. Mr. Gilbert, before we proceed with testimony, I want to inquire as to whether or not you have watched any of the trial, either online or through any news media outlet or here in person in court.
I have not.
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else their trial testimony?
No.
Okay, thank you for your responses. You can inquire on direct, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Todd Gilbert, TODDGILBERT.
Do you know an individual named Chad Daybell?
Yes, I do.
And did you know an individual named Tammy or Tamara Daybell?
Yes.
How did you know them?
In 2015, I heard of Chad Daybell. He was an author and wrote books. And that's how I heard of him and that he was an author.
Had you read some of his books?
Yes.
And did you read those books before you ever actually met Chad in person?
Most of them, yes.
And then did you end up relocating?
Yes. We moved into the Salem area in Chad's neighborhood around March of 2017.
Did you meet Chad in person at that time?
Yes.
And did you also meet Tammy in person?
Yes.
And outside of Chad being an author, how did you come to meet them?
We were in the same ward with him, the same neighborhood. And so within a week, I believe we met him at church and introduced ourselves. And that's how it started off right there.
Out of Tammy and Chad, would you say there was one of them that you knew better or spent more time with?
Yes, Chad.
And how often would you see Chad?
Probably on average about once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on time of year and that.
And was that generally at church?
Yes.
Did you see him at times outside of church?
Yes. Sometimes I'd see him on his lawn, or sometimes he had me come over and help him do some plumbing stuff.
And we talked about that you'd read some of Chad's books. Did Chad ever discuss his religious beliefs or his purported beliefs with you?
Yes, a little bit sometimes. They didn't ring true with me on everything. I thought, well, I had no reason to doubt him, but maybe they happened to him and things that he was going to see in the area and that. So
And when you talk about things he was going to see, are those oftentimes referred to as visions?
yes,
And did you talk to Chad about some of the books he had written?
yes,
And did he share with you whether those were fictional or non-fictional?
yes. He also wrote children's books earlier. I didn't read any of them, but he wrote a couple of different series. And I'd read the first series and the second series, and he was in the process of finishing the second series in 2019. And so we did discuss a lot of the different events that he had in the books, both series.
And was it your understanding that all those events were fictional?
Yes, they were fictional based on his dreams, visions, near-death experience.
So part of the books were based on his visions at least,
Yes,
and then part of them was fictional,
right.
was your understanding.
Yes, that's what I understood.
When Chad would talk with you about his beliefs, did it feel like he was trying to teach you or just share them with you?
A lot of times we would just kind of talk about the events that he'd seen. At that point, he wasn't necessarily really trying to teach me anything. He was just talking about things in the future that was coming up.
And when we talked about church, what church is it?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And did the things Chad tell you always comport with standard LDS doctrine?
No,
And it sounded like you would be willing to listen to him when he would share these things with you. Is that fair?
yes, I would listen to some of the stuff he had to say. It was interesting.
Did you hold all those same beliefs?
No,
Do you recall Chad coming to your residence around February of 2019?
yes,
Do you recall anything about that visit that stood out to you?
yes. Myself and my wife were working on a bedroom floor trying to get some old tile out so we could put some carpet in. And Chad sent me a text, said he wanted to come over and talk to us. So he came over and we were finishing up, and he talked about some other stuff and talked about on the way out, he says, I don't know if I should say this to you, but I feel like I should tell you that Tammy's mission is going to come to an end, or her life mission, before her 50th birthday.
At that time, did you know how old Tammy was?
No, I figured she was around 48, though, it seems like.
At some point, did you learn of Tammy's passing?
Yes.
Do you recall when you learned of her passing?
Yes, on the morning of October 19th, 2019, about 7 a.m., we received a phone call from Emma, Chad's daughter, and she was crying, and she said that her
Judge,
mom.
I'm going to object. Hearsay.
Sustained.
And did Emma seem upset to you?
Yes,
I think you indicated she was crying.
yes,
At some point, did Chad take the phone?
yes,
And at some point during that call, did you learn of Tammy's passing?
yes,
Did you end up going to the Daybell residence that morning?
yes, we did.
Do you recall approximately what time you would have gone over?
It was around 8:15 a.m. In the morning.
When you got to the residence, did you make any observations of Chad?
Yes. When we walked in the living room, all of his children were there except for Mark, which was on a mission. I'm not sure if his second daughter was there. And they were all sitting on the couch. And Chad he didn't seem like he was real sad like I would expect somebody to be after their spouse had just passed on. He seemed kind of businesslike to me, I thought, and I thought that was kind of strange. And I know Chad's demeanor was a little hard to figure out because he's soft-spoken. So sometimes it was hard to tell if he was crying. So that's how it looked to me that morning.
And you said you arrived there around 8:15, you believe?
Yes,
So Tammy had just been pronounced dead shortly before that. Was that your understanding?
that's what we understand, yes.
Do you recall Chad making any statements to you that day or having a conversation with him?
Yes, I was talking to him about it a little bit, and I said to him, I'd forgot that what he had told me in February about Tammy passing. I said to him, well, it looks like it must have happened. And he said, yes, it did. And he kind of turned his back away from the children, which were sitting on the couch. And he says that they didn't really know about it. They hadn't heard of it before. He hadn't told them.
And when you say they hadn't heard of it and he hadn't told them, is that referring to his vision that Tammy was going to pass away?
Yes.
Do you recall if Chad told you anything regarding how Tammy had died?
Yes. I asked him if he had any idea of what happened to her. And he says that she got up around midnight. She had a big coughing spell and she also threw up, and that she went back to bed. And then he told me that he figures she died around 2 a.m. and from an embolism or something like that. I don't know how he knew that, and that about 5:30, she rolled her weight of her body. I guess she rolled out of bed onto the floor partially, and he hollered for Gar to come and help her come and help lift her back on the bed.
So he told you it was believed the time of death was around 2 a.m.
Yes.
And then he indicated to you that 3 to 4 hours later, she rolled out of bed.
Yes.
Had you had an opportunity prior to Tammy's passing to observe her?
Yes, several occasions. We would see her shopping at Walmart. She looked fine, talked fine. We'd see her at church.
Judge, I'm going to
A
object
lot.
at this point. It's becoming a narrative.
Overruled.
You can continue.
We would see her at church at least once a week. See her out in the yard when we was driving by, turning the corner, and she looked fine.
And you say she looked fine. Did you ever notice anything with regard to her appearing to have failing health?
No.
Were you ever able to make observations of Chad and Tammy together?
Yes.
What did you observe about their interactions with each other?
When we first moved into the Salem area, I was assigned as a home teacher for the church to go to his home. And usually him and Tammy would be sitting on the couch and they were holding hands and seemed like a good couple. And then at church, it was a lot the same. When we first moved into the ward, they were pretty well halfway up to the front or even closer to the front. I did notice as time went on in 2019, start of 2019 to Tammy's death, that they were slowly moving towards the back like they were trying to hide or didn't want to be seen, or their demeanor seemed to be a little separate from each other.
And in relation to you and Chad talking, at any point did he decrease in telling you about his beliefs or different things like that?
Yes, that was about the same time, beginning of 2019 and to 2018. He was harder to find him at church, I guess, to ask him, anything, and he told me that, the preparation world was slowing down a little bit. People were kind of tired of it, didn't want to know as much. And so there just wasn't as much going on. And he was harder to, I guess, corner to talk to.
And going back to October 19th, did you leave and come back to the residence that day, to the Daybell residence?
Yes. Well, after we'd been there a while, we asked Chad if the family would like breakfast. So we went to the McDonald's in Rexburg and got breakfast and brought it back to him. And when we arrived, there was more people there then. And so Gar said just to leave it on the kitchen table there. So that's where we left it.
At some point, do you recall having a conversation with Chad about what his plans were in relation to staying in the residence?
Yes, the day after the funeral, the same night that they had the memorial, I believe it was on a Wednesday night, we took him dinner over there around 6, I believe. And after talking to him for a minute, he said, I've got to move out. I can't stay here anymore. And so I asked him where he was going to move to, and he said he has a friend over on Pioneer Road in Rexburg, had an apartment that's not there all the time, and that he was going to move in with that person, which I figured was a man at the time.
And did Chad ever provide you the name of who he was going to move in with?
No, he didn't.
And you talked about that being after Tammy's memorial. Do you recall when her memorial was?
Yeah, it was the Wednesday after Tammy died. Can't remember exactly what date.
And do you recall that Tammy died on a Saturday?
Yes.
Did you attend her funeral?
Yes, we did.
And do you recall when her funeral was?
It was the following Tuesday, which was the 22nd, I believe.
And do you recall where the funeral was?
Yes, in Springville, Utah.
Did anything strike you as odd about the timing of the funeral?
Yes, it seemed like things were way hurried fast. We, going back to when Tammy died, when we were there, we asked him about, about the funeral, and we figured it was going to be a few more days than the following Tuesday. That seemed real odd, that like somebody had been thinking ahead of time.
Judge, I'm going to
Had that.
object.
Grounds
Speculation.
overruled.
You can continue.
That seemed real fast to have a funeral for your spouse that you were in love with. And so it just seemed real fast to us and odd.
And in attending the funeral, did you make any observations of Chad?
Yes, when we arrived there, we went in, and it was before it started. So we went in the viewing area, and Chad and his children are in there along with relatives on both sides of the family. And he was standing by the casket, and he seemed okay, looked okay. We talked to him for a minute or two, and looked at Tammy in the casket, and we felt like we needed a closure with Tammy because we'd known her, and that he just seemed like he was in a hurry to get it over with, kind of like, I guess you might say.
Married.
And then we talked about when you got back, you went to his residence after the memorial. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you attend the memorial?
No, we did not.
And it's at that time that he let you know he was going to be moving out?
Yes.
Sometime after that, did you and your wife make contact with Chad?
Yes, I believe it's the following Saturday or somewhere in that area. We thought, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to run over and see how he's doing and take a pizza to him. So we gave him a call about 5:30 p.m. and he said, well, maybe I'll just hurry and come over and see you guys at your house. So like he didn't want us to come over to his place. So that's how we lined it up.
And did he in fact end up coming to your residence?
Yes, he got there about 6 o'clock.
And when he arrived at the residence, did you end up having a conversation with him?
Yes, he come in, and my wife had just got done making some cookies. So he sit down at the table, and we were kind of standing there just chatting, how he was doing. He wanted to know how we were doing. And then he seemed a little hesitant. He says, I need to tell you something. And he says, I have a girlfriend.
Ugh.
And of course, we about fell on the floor, but, and he, I kind of felt like he was a little hesitant to tell us, and like he was going to have to prod him to say who it was. But then he said her name was Lori Ballo. And I thought to myself, I've heard that name before. And then I thought of a podcast that I'd heard her on.
Had you ever met Lori Vallow in person?
Not at that time.
And this occurred approximately a week or a little less than a week after Tammy was pronounced dead?
Yes, it's probably about a week and a half.
A week and a half.
Did he end up telling you anything else about his girlfriend other than her name?
Yes, he said that that Tammy's mission was basically over with this earth life, and so his second half of his life was supposed to be with Lori, and that she was going to help him do his mission, and
In prison.
that she was beautiful and stuff like that.
And was Lori was not with him on that occasion, is that right?
No.
At some point, did you end up meeting Lori?
Yes, why Chad was still there. He says that Lori and her friends were going to be in the area, and that would we like to meet her? And we said, yes, we would. And so we worked in the Rexburg temple on Tuesdays. We had the night shift, and Chad said that him and her, or Lori, And a couple of her friends were going to be in the temple doing some work that afternoon and that they'd try to meet us.
And did you in fact end up meeting them at the temple?
Yes.
So the first time you met Lori in person, she was at the temple with Chad?
Yes.
At a later time, do you recall Chad and Lori coming to your residence?
Yes, it was 2 or 3 days after that, I believe.
And when they came to your residence, did you end up having a conversation with them?
Yes.
Do you recall what they told you?
They, when they first come in, they were real happy, excited, kind of like with each other. So we invited them in, come sit on the couch. They ended up sitting real close to each other, holding hands. And one thing we thought was strange, I seen Chad rubbing her leg, and I thought to myself, that's kind of odd. Your first wife has died within a week and a half, and you're carrying on kind of like a teenager sitting there that's first in love. So I thought it was odd.
Gross.
Had you ever seen him act like that with Tammy?
No.
Do you recall them talking to you about their plans for a future together?
Yes, they said that they were going to eventually end up in Hawaii. And I guess Lori'd already lived over there, so they were going to go back to Hawaii and live permanently after they got things all wrapped up here.
Do you recall if they indicated their plan to be together?
Yes, they were planning on being together, eventually get married.
And do you recall if there was any conversation regarding Lori's former spouse?
Yes, while they were there, we asked him, the normal stuff you'd ask people when they come visit you the first time. Have you been married before? She said, yes, she had. That her husband had died of a heart attack in December 2018 is what
Marla,
she told us.
Do you recall any conversations or statements made regarding Lori's daughter?
Yes, we asked her if she had any children. She said that she had had several. And Chad kind of popped up and said that she had a daughter that had just died. And so we didn't know what to think of that.
When Chad mentioned that Lori had a daughter that had just died, did Lori say anything different?
No, she didn't say anything.
Do you recall if either of them ever mentioned Lori having a minor son?
No, I can't recall anything of that.
And after that visit, do you recall them coming to your residence on another occasion?
Yes, they came back. What was it? Probably about the second week in November, I believe, 2019, after they had got married. Why? And they kind of stopped in just to see us, and they wanted to show us all of their wedding pictures, which we thought was quite a few. And so then they talked about how they had planned a family trip with Chad's children, the ones that were here, and yeah, all of his children, to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm around Thanksgiving time.
Did they ever mention taking Lori's children with them on
No.
that trip?
No.
And they shared with you their wedding photos?
Yes.
Did you learn when they had gotten married?
We was informed probably a week before that they had got married on the 5th of November.
In those wedding photos they shared with you, did you ever see a teenage girl?
No.
Ever see a minor boy?
Nope.
Did you see Alex Cox in those pictures?
No.
Have you met Melanie Gibb before?
Yes.
Did you see her in those pictures?
No.
Who was in the pictures?
Just Chad and Lori.
Did you ever have occasion to talk with Chad about how his kids felt about Lori?
Yes, when we would see him, he would already kind of bring it up himself that they were fine with Lori, that Tammy had appeared to him in spirit, I don't know, at least twice, and said that she was doing fine and that she understood the plan, that she was going to move on in the spirit world, and then that Chad's mission was to be married to Lori, and that his children were basically becoming fine with that thing, which seemed odd to us, but
And he specifically indicated Tammy had come to him in a vision or something,
yes,
and she'd indicated she was fine with everything.
yes.
After that visit around Thanksgiving, did Chad ever, or I think it was a little before Thanksgiving, did Chad ever return to your residence at a later time?
I can't say for sure, but it seems like it. There was about 3 different times.
And I think you said that your understanding was Chad and Lori's plan was to eventually move to Hawaii permanently.
Yes.
Did some additional visits happen before they moved?
Not that I can recall. The last time we seen him was before Thanksgiving.
And after they'd moved, at some point, did Chad end up coming to your residence?
Yes, he came to our residence after Lori was brought back to Rexburg and after he got back into the area.
And do you recall why Chad came to your residence?
Yes, I remember that when he walked in the door, he says that the Christ had sent me here to ask you guys if you would be willing to put your home up for bond to get Tammy out of jail.
Yeah, Jan.
Not Tammy, excuse me,
Lori.
Lori out of jail.
Did you end up agreeing to do that?
No. There's a lot more things that had to be figured out before that was going to happen.
And do you recall being present for a conversation regarding the statement Chad had previously made about Lori's daughter?
Yes.
And what do you recall hearing Chad say?
I remember him saying that she didn't really like him too much and that so she would kind of stay away from him. She was like a typical college student.
And have you been to the Daybell residence before?
Yes.
Are there stairs somewhere in the residence?
There is one set that lead up to a room in the back part of the home.
I have no further questions.
All right. That'll conclude the direct. We can go ahead. Let's go ahead and begin with cross. I think, Mr. Pryor, where we're at. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gilbert.
Good afternoon.
So the last question the prosecutor asked you is about a part of the house that have stairs.
The stairs.
You're familiar with the Daybell house, correct?
Yes,
The brick part of the house is a one-story building. Is that fair?
correct.
And then on the back is an attached building that has some stairs, it's almost like an attached garage. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
How would you describe that attached building?
The mechanical room in the bottom, storage room in the bottom, and then just a room up above it.
And to your knowledge, did anybody ever use that for sleeping quarters?
I believe Garth might have once in a while.
It wasn't used for anything else but storage. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony. Move to strike.
Sustained.
Garth may have used it once. Is that correct? Or a couple of times?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony. Move to strike.
Sustained.
And
The
prior,
attached building that you're talking about, who used the building?
It looked like the whole family used the building to me. They had a ham radio up there,
Okay.
set of drums.
Was, to your knowledge, was there ever a bedroom set up there?
There was a bed.
Okay. Was there ever a desk or any office furniture,
Not that I'd seen.
computer?
Nope.
No kind of organized office up there?
No.
Okay. And do you know whether or not there was utilities available to that room up there?
I do not believe there was heat up there, so I don't think so other than power.
Okay, all right. Now, you mentioned the name Melanie Gibb a couple of times. You recognized her through some sort of a podcast, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now, is that something that occasionally you would listen to one of her podcasts?
Yes.
And is she someone who is involved in anything, any organization attached to the LDS faith?
No, not that I'm aware of.
She does something, are you familiar with the term preparing the people?
Yes.
And then she's involved in that organization.
To my knowledge, not really.
How do you, other than the podcast, how do you know Melanie Gibb?
When they had the Preparing the People conference up here in Caldwell, Idaho, over here, that in February 2019, we went over there and Chad introduced me to her.
Okay. Did you know Melanie Gibb from any other occasion?
I'd never met her. I just heard her.
And she spoke at that conference?
Yes, I believe so.
And on the subject of speaking at conferences, were you aware of Chad ever making statements at any of his conferences about Tammy's health or whether he has any predictions about her demise?
No, I never did hear him publicly say that in any of the conferences.
Okay. And did you have an occasion to attend these conferences somewhat regularly?
We attended 3 of them.
Okay. And the term "avow" came across as part of my research. Do you know what the term "avow" is?
Yes, it stands for, it's a website, but I can't remember what avow stands for now.
Okay. Is it linked to this preparing the people stuff?
No,
It has a,
it is a preparation website.
it is not, or it is?
It is.
It's a preparation website. And when we're talking about preparation, that's not necessarily anything that's inconsistent with the LDS faith, correct?
No,
I mean, there's no limitation through your faith saying you can't participate in this preparation stuff, right?
no.
And Chad was an active member in the LDS faith throughout the time you've known him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the writing of these fiction books doesn't necessarily preclude him from being a part of his LDS faith. Is that fair?
No.
Okay. And he is entitled to his opinion as to how he would express what he believes versus what maybe someone else in the LDS faith would believe, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You made mention of meeting at the temple and meeting Lori Vallow.
Yes.
I don't know the limitations of your faith, so that's why I'm asking this question. When you go to the temple, is there a limitation as to who's allowed to go to this temple?
Well, yes, you have to be basically an active member and have a temple recommend to get in the temple.
Okay, so what's a temple recommend?
That's where you go see your bishop, which is over the ward, and he asks you a set of questions to see if you're basically living the gospel.
Okay, so when you went to the temple, who you saw Lori Vallow there? Who else was there?
There was Melanie Boudreau, and I can't recall the other lady.
Okay. Now, are you aware if it was Lori Vallow who told Chad Daybell Tylee didn't like him?
No, it seemed like that's just what Chad said.
Okay. And you mentioned that Chad is a soft-spoken person.
Yes.
He's not a dynamic personality, is he?
No.
Somewhat shy?
It looks that way, yeah.
reserved?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the family was planning a trip to Knott's Berry Farm or I'm sorry, first you said Disneyland and Knott's Berry.
Heard both,
And this was in the second week of November, correct?
right?
That's when you met with Chad?
That's when they come over the second time to,
Okay, so it wasn't a secret that they were planning on going on a vacation with the family to Knott's Berry Farm. That wasn't any kind of a
I
secret, right?
don't believe so.
Okay, the common knowledge.
Yeah,
And that had been planned. You said the second week of November. Could we be more specific about the time or date, or you just don't remember?
I don't recall. I would say it was about a week after they got married.
Okay.
Him and Lori, that is.
So would it be fair to say that by the second week of November, there were already plans in place to go on this family vacation?
Well, I would think they probably had plans then.
Right.
Yes,
And when we say the second week of November, are we talking like the 14th of November?
possibly.
Okay. And Judge, if I could just have a minute.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Oh, yeah. So when you spoke to Chad about the circumstances surrounding Tammy's death, he mentioned to you that she had a coughing spell that night, right?
Correct.
And he mentioned to you that she had been vomiting.
Yes.
Did he say what she may have eaten that was causing her to vomit that night?
No.
Okay. And then there was some discussion about some sort of an embolism, or there was something with her head that went wrong. Is that fair?
He didn't say head, he just said embolism.
Okay. Okay. And then there was a discussion with Chad that when they discovered Tammy in the morning, that he called out to Garth. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And so that's what he told you,
Yes,
right?
that's what he said.
And then he also told you that when he called out to Garth and Chad had to pick Tammy up off the floor and put her back into the bed. Is that what you were
That's the
saying?
way I understood it.
Okay. Okay, Judge, I don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
All right. Blake, if you'd like to redirect, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gilbert, you were asked if preparing a people is attached to the LDS faith. Is that specifically attached to the LDS faith?
No,
And were some of the things Chad discussed beyond the standard LDS teachings?
you mean when he was speaking in them?
No, sorry,
just-
let me back up. When he would talk with you, were some of the things that he shared beyond the standard LDS beliefs?
Yes,
You were asked about getting a temple recommend. If someone disclosed they were having an affair, would they qualify for a temple recommend?
no,
And you were asked about Garth and Chad picking Tammy back up and putting her in bed, and you recall them telling you that?
yes,
You were also told that Tammy died around 2 a.m., correct?
yes,
And you were told she rolled out of bed several
Yeah.
hours later?
yes.
I have nothing further.
All right, then that will conclude the testimony of Mr. Gilbert. Is the state intending to recall him at any point?
No, Your Honor, Mr. Gilbert can be excused.
Will he be called in the defense?
I won't be calling him, Judge. Thank you, sir.
All right, you're released from any subpoena. Thank you for appearing to testify. Ms. Blake, would you prefer to start a new witness at this time or have a mid-afternoon recess?
Your Honor, we'll leave it to the court's discretion. We have a couple of additional witnesses. If the court wants to take an afternoon break now, that's fine. I think we do have one witness that would be a little shorter as well if the court wants us to continue.
Let's take the recess at this time and we'll continue on after that. So it's about 10 after. Let's try to come back on at 2:30, please.
All right, please. All rise. District Court's again in session.
All right, thank you. We do have the jurors lined up, I believe, so we'll go ahead and just have them brought in if we're ready.
All rise, please. Jury's all present, accounted for, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. The jury's returned from the mid-afternoon recess, is properly seated. The state just concluded with the witness, Mr. Gilbert. And so at this time, I believe the state's prepared to call another witness. Is that correct?
We are, Your Honor. The state would call Janice Olson.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now that the witness has been sworn, I just need to inquire because of an exclusionary order in the case that doesn't allow for witnesses to view testimony. This trial's been live streamed and open to the public. Ms. Olson, have you observed any of the trial since it started?
No,
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else testimony they've given in the trial?
no.
Okay, thank you for your responses, Mr. Wixom. You may go ahead and inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state your full name and spell it for the record, please?
Janice Olson, Janiceolson.
Thank you. And where do you live?
Just a little out of St. Anthony,
And where is that relative to Salem, Idaho?
about 12, 15 miles away.
And what do you do for work?
I teach first grade.
How long have you taught first grade?
This will be my 30th year.
And have you always taught at the same school?
Yes,
Which school is that?
Central Elementary
And where is that school?
in Sugar City.
And I want to draw your attention back to October of 2019. Do you recall working with Tammy Daybell?
Yes,
And can you explain to the jury at work, how often did you have interaction with Tammy?
all day. We're just kind of in and out of our classrooms, in the hall, the lunchroom, in our teacher's workroom.
So is it fair to say you saw her multiple times a day?
Yes,
And you said the lunchroom. Did you ever have occasion to have lunch with her?
yes.
How often do you think that would happen?
3, 4 times a week.
If you were to think about the working relationship you had with her, how would you describe that relationship?
She was a friend, good colleague.
And when you interacted with her at school, did you have any chance or opportunity to observe her activity or her work?
Yes,
What did you observe about her?
she was very organized, on top of things. She always went the extra mile to get books into kids' hands and to make sure we knew what was in the library. And
Did you ever, I'll withdraw that. Where is the library in the school?
Down the hall. You walk in, you just go straight down the hall and to the left, just after the lunchroom.
How would Tammy go and get students and bring them to the library? What did she have to do?
She would actually stay in the library. Well, she'd come around and gather books during the week if you had library that day. But then when it was our library time, we'd take our class down, drop them off at the library, pick them back up after they were done.
Outside of school, were you ever involved in any activities with Tammy?
Yes.
What activities were those?
She came to our high fit / Zumba class a couple times a week.
How often? Twice a week, you say?
Mhm.
How long is each class?
An hour.
Drawing again your attention back to October of 2019, I'm going to ask you just to speak of the last couple of months before that time. Was Tammy a regular attender of the class?
Yes.
And when you went to class, did you have the opportunity to observe her in class?
Yes.
And what did you observe her doing in the class typically?
Just following along, just like everybody else.
Did you ever notice whether or not she seemed to struggle in the class?
No,
Did she ever fall behind?
no,
Did she ever quit early?
no. Usually if she thought it was too hard, I mean, everybody does it. If they're out of wind for a second, they stop and march, or they just keep moving and then join back up.
Did she ever do that?
I don't recall if she did, but I'm sure we all do.
So just based on those observations, did you make any observations about Tammy's health or fitness level?
Yeah, she was active and healthy.
Did you eventually learn of Tammy's death?
Yes.
How did you learn of her death?
I had a student in my class whose mother worked with her in her church calling.
And how did you learn?
Oh, sorry. She called me that morning to tell me.
What was your reaction when you had learned of her death?
Shock.
Why shock?
Because I'd just seen her on Friday and she was fine and she was at exercise class that week.
When you say you had just seen her on Friday, which Friday are you talking about?
Well, the Friday at school, the day before, it was just Friday at school, and then it got called Saturday morning. So
are we talking about the Friday before she passed away on Saturday?
yes,
And you said you had seen her there?
yes,
Had you interacted with her that much that day?
I'm sure I did.
Did she ever mention anything that day to you about not feeling well?
No,
Did she ever mention anything about her health at all there?
no,
Did you notice her to have any kind of symptoms or appear to not be feeling well?
no,
Generally speaking, was Tammy the type of personality, did she ever complain about things?
no,
Do you recall her ever complaining about health matters at all?
no.
Again, focused on that last couple of months before she passed, did you ever observe whether or not Tammy had made any significant gains or decreases in weight?
I haven't. I didn't.
So is it fair to say she appeared to stay at the same weight?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Just briefly, Judge, thank you.
So if I understand your testimony, Ms. Olson, is it true that the children were brought to Tammy for exercising their library time?
Yes.
So Tammy would not have to walk to the other end of the school to pick up the children and then walk them back every day, right? Correct?
Correct.
In other words, the children were as part of their hour, I guess I don't know how this would work, but as part of their library hour, the teacher's responsibility were to gather up their students, walk them to the library, and then at the return of their hour, the teacher would go back to the library, pick up the students and bring them back to their class. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Friday before Tammy passed away. As part of her duties as the librarian, that day was particularly busy that Friday because do you recall that she was trying to get all of the boxes and books together for the book fair?
Objection, counsel is testifying, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Do you have any recollection of Tammy preparing for a book fair that Friday?
No, I don't.
Okay, nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Redirect, Mr. Wixom.
Just a couple of questions, please. Ma'am, can you please explain for the jury, where was your classroom relative to the library in the school?
I'm right by the front doors, just as you come inside to the left.
So related to the library, where is that?
Well, I'm here and you would go down the hall around the lunchroom and she'd be just the first doors on the left.
Would it be fair to say that it'd be possible that Tammy could be walking around in the school and you wouldn't?
Well, on those grounds, it's just for speculation, Mr. Wixom, so I'll sustain an objection there.
Did you ever see Tammy walking around in school at all?
All day, every day.
When would you see her walking? What would she be doing?
She'd be coming to gather up the books before we made it to library. For each class, she would be passing out books. If I had said I'm teaching about insects or something, she would gather up some really good insect books that she had in the library and bring them to our classes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wixom. Mr. Wixom, would there be any need to recall this witness?
There is not, Your Honor.
Will the defense call the witness? Okay, if you appear under subpoena, you're released from the subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying in trial.
Thank you.
You can be excused. You can call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Taylor Ballard.
Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ballard, you've been placed under oath. I just want to inquire before you testify. This case has been live streamed on the court's channel as well as open to the public to view the trial proceedings. Have you observed any of the trial testimony that's taken place since the trial started?
No, sir.
All right, and have you talked to anyone else about testimony they have given at trial?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you for your responses. Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to inquire, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Taylor Ballard, TaylorBallard.
And where do you live?
Rexburg, Idaho.
What do you do for work?
I'm a health insurance broker at Ballard Insurance Group.
How long have you been an insurance broker?
14 years.
Is that something that requires a license from the state?
It is.
Can you just briefly explain to the jury the difference between an insurance broker and an agent?
An insurance agent represents one carrier, one health carrier or company, and an insurance broker represents several.
In your work, do you help people get medical insurance?
I do.
Is that something you've done for the entire 14 years?
Yes.
I now want to ask you, do you know Chad Daybell?
On a professional level.
When did you first become acquainted with him?
October 31st, 2019.
And how did you become acquainted with him?
He came into my office to inquire about an individual health policy for him and his children.
And were you able to help him with that?
Yes.
Did he explain why he needed the insurance?
I was already aware he had been referred to us. He was losing coverage that day from his deceased wife's policy through her employer plan, who we also administer.
So is it fair to say you weren't surprised by his inquiry?
Right.
And when you said he was inquiring about coverage for his children, did he tell you which children he was trying to cover?
Yes, it was Seth, Leah, and Mark.
At that point in time, did he make any inquiries about the possibilities of adding a spouse?
No.
And just very briefly, what, under most medical plans, what qualifications does a dependent have to meet to be able to be put on a parent or step parent's policy?
On the individual market, which is what we were talking about, they need to be under 26, unmarried, and claimed as a tax dependent on the joint return.
So can a step parent add a stepchild to their policy?
Yes.
And during that initial contact and that request about insurance information, what information did you need to gather from him to look at what policies you might be able to help with?
These particular policies that he was interested in are based on income to see if you can qualify for assistance. So we discussed income as well as demographic information for him and the children.
What information did he give you about income?
He stated that without his wife's income, now that she had passed away, his self-employment of a book publishing company would operate at a loss.
Did you do anything to verify that status of income?
At that time, it was just verbal.
Did you later request that he verify his income?
Yes.
And how did you request that verification come?
I went to Health and Welfare to apply him for the benefits, and their interface was showing that his self-employment was reporting at about 30,000 profit annually. So they stated we would need a copy of his tax return.
Did you eventually request a copy of the tax return?
Yes.
And we'll come back to that. So it sounds like it sounds like he initially told you he was operating at a loss, but you found out he was making $30,000 a year?
According to Health and Welfare's interface, yes.
And a moment ago, you also said in that conversation that you were gathering demographic information about the children.
Mhm.
Can you, and when you do answer for the record, a yes or no, so the record will capture that. What demographic information were you gathering? What were you asking of him?
Children's names, birthdays, socials.
And so did he provide all that information with respect to the children he was trying to cover?
Yes.
After that particular meeting, when's the next time that you recall talking to him?
I texted him on November 5th, 2019, asking if he could provide a copy of his 2018 tax return.
Did he respond?
He did.
What did he say?
He responded that day saying he was out of town all week, but he would probably be able to stop by the following week.
Did he eventually produce the tax return?
Yes.
Okay. And then when's the next time you had contact with him?
November 21st, 2019.
And can you please explain the nature of that contact? Did you talk to him on the phone, text? Did he come in?
I reached out to him via text, and then he came into my office.
And what was your purpose in texting him that day?
Based on the tax return that was provided, it was proven that his business did operate at a profit, and so therefore he was eligible for different insurance than we had previously discussed. So we discussed what his options would look like for January 2020.
And in that conversation, what do you recall him mentioning at that point?
He had asked me if he were to get married, how hard it would be to add the new wife.
And if he said that as a hypothetical,
Yes,
so he didn't tell you that he had been married.
correct.
And what was your reaction to that?
I just told him that there's lots of variables and we could worry about that when we got to it if it happened.
In that conversation, did he ever later state that he had plans to marry?
When I responded with what I just told you, he said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll probably be married by the end of the year. So I'm just curious what the process looks like.
And both of these statements came on the 21st of November, correct?
Yes.
At that point in time, did the two of you discuss any other potential dependents?
No.
At that point in time, did you gather any additional information or submit any type of insurance application?
Not on the 21st. No.
During that conversation, at any point, did Chad ever mention to you the names JJ or Tylee?
No.
When's the next time you recall having interaction with him?
December 11th, 2019.
And what was that occasion? Explain that to the jury, please.
He just wanted to make sure he was square for January of 2020. And so we discussed, he picked his plan and he paid for it.
Okay. So he actually applied for the plan on that date on December 10th?
In between the 21st and the 11th is when I had been doing the back work. And on the 11th, he was calling to follow up.
Did you have any conversations with him during that time frame?
Mm-mm.
At that point in time, when he picked his plan, did he pay a premium for the plan?
Yeah.
At that point in time, did he bring up the name JJ or Tylee?
No.
Did he bring up the name Lori?
No.
When's the next time? Well, let me withdraw that. At any point in time after that, did you ever receive any mail at your office for Chad?
Yes.
What did you receive, the best you can recall?
We received 5 letters. I believe 2 of them were from Health and Welfare and 3 of them were from Select Health, which is the carrier that he chose. They were addressed to him, but they had our address on them.
Is that something that may typically happen in your business?
Never.
So clients never forwarded or used your address to have mail sent to?
Never.
Did that strike you as normal, cause any questions for you?
It definitely was not normal. We weren't sure why that was happening because all of the applications that we took and all of the online systems showed the address he had provided me.
So what do you recall as the next interaction with Chad?
March 11th, 2020.
Do you recall any interaction with him during December?
Only when he called to make his payment.
At any point in time after he made his payment for his insurance, had you learned anything about JJ or Tylee? Overall. May answer.
Yes.
What did you learn about them and when?
December 23rd of 2019, I was in Health and Welfare doing other business and it got brought up to me as if I was asked if I had heard about it yet.
Just generally speaking, what had you learned about JJ and Tylee?
That Chad had remarried someone who had 2 children and they were missing.
Did that cause you any concern at that point?
Yes.
What was the concern?
Well, I was just confused. I didn't know what to think of it because when they first mentioned that children were missing, I wondered if it was the children that I had helped him insure. And then it also made me question his deceased wife's.
In what way did you question that?
Can you ask me that again?
In what way did it make you question his deceased wife?
I was just curious of the timing. It just seemed fast.
Let me ask this. Did your office handle any insurance for Tammy before she passed?
Yes.
What insurance policies did your office handle for Tammy?
Health, life, disability.
So did you at any point in that time period look at any of Tammy's insurance policies?
Yes.
What did you look at?
I checked to see what her life insurance amount was and if it had been paid out yet.
And what did you find?
That it had been paid out and that her most recent open enrollment, which was in August for September 1st effective date, that she had upped it to the max.
And is it normal for an insurance broker to look at those types of things?
Yes.
Why?
To make sure the beneficiaries are correct, to make sure that we have the right amounts on there since it has to do with their income, what they qualify for.
And then I believe you were starting to try to explain, you did have a contact with Chad on the, was it the 1st of March or when was the next contact?
March 11th.
Thank you. Can you please describe to the jury what was the nature of that contact?
He had come into my office to inquire about getting health insurance for his wife.
At that point, did he tell you who his wife was?
Yes.
Who did he say?
He said her name was Lori Daybell, and he wrote her name on a sticky note, Lori Ryan Daybell.
Did he happen to mention to you when he had married her?
He said November 5th, 2019.
What was your reaction to his inquiry about adding his wife at that point?
Well, he had stated to me that he had stated to me that she was incarcerated, and so I told him she wouldn't necessarily need insurance right now, but he was worried about something happening to her. And I told him she would be covered under the state as long as she was incarcerated.
Did you have any further discussion about how to potentially insure her if she were to no longer be incarcerated?
Yes, when he told me the date of marriage, I told him that that was outside of the enrollment window. It had been longer than 60 days. He said that she should be getting out the following week, and I told him that we could use that as a qualifying event.
So was a plan made then at that point to do so if she became unincarcerated?
Yes.
Just the general nature of that conversation, was there anything unusual about that conversation?
He, no. No.
At any point in that conversation, did he ever bring up anything about his computer?
I was going through all of the information, confirming what was different and what was the same. And when we got to the income, he said, they confiscated my computer, so I haven't been able to pay myself yet.
And what was your reaction to that?
I said, they.
Okay. And did he explain who he's talking about?
He said, the FBI.
Did he say anything else to you about the situation in that conversation?
About the confiscation?
Just his personal situation generally.
Just that he was wanting to make sure that he, his wife, and his son, Mark, would be covered.
And in that conversation, did you ask him any follow-up about adding dependents?
I did.
What did you ask him?
Back then, the application states, is there anyone else in your household, whether they need coverage or not? Is there anyone on your tax return, whether they need coverage or not? And so I just went through those normal questions.
And in that line of questioning with him, did he ever mention JJ or Tylee?
No.
Why did you go through the line of questions with him specifically? What was your reason?
That's what I would do with anybody. It's the questions that are on the application.
Having learned about JJ and Tylee's missing status, did that cause you any concern when you were processing this paperwork for Mr. Daybell at that point?
Yes.
What was the concern?
Just, I mean, it was all over the news that they were missing, and him saying that just validated that they were.
What about concerns relative to the insurance policy?
It made me think we may have a fraudulent life payout.
Explain that, please.
I was worried that Tammy's death may have not been an accident and that the life premiums may have been paid out when they shouldn't have been.
You said premiums, the life premiums.
Sorry, the life insurance money.
Now, relative to the health or medical insurance he was seeking at that time, did his lack of bringing anything up about JJ and Tylee cause concerns about that health insurance coverage?
Yes.
What was that concern?
To me, it seemed like they weren't going to need any insurance. All that he was asking about was him, Lori, and Mark.
What happened next?
Back then, everything used to take overnight to update. And so we parted ways that day. And I told him that I would reach out when the premium rates were ready the next day.
And did you do that?
Yes.
How did you do that?
Text message.
Did he respond?
Yes.
How did he respond?
Text message.
Okay. Did you at some point talk to him again?
Yes.
What was the next conversation and when?
March 16th, he reached out to me. He had gotten some notices saying that his wife Lori's identity was not verifying. They were notices from the health and welfare saying we can't verify her information. Can you provide us with more?
Did he provide anything to you?
Yes.
What did he provide?
Their marriage certificate and her driver's license.
What happened next in terms of contact with Chad?
Between, let's see, that was March 16th. We talked again on March 18th, letting him know it was resolved.
Any further contact with him?
A few days later, he reached out about another notice that he received. I let him know that it was taken care of. And I think that was March 26th. And that was the last time I talked to him.
March 26th was the last time you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything come up in that conversation about his status or his dependence?
No, not about the dependents.
What did anything come up in the conversation at all?
I mean, yes, we small talked. He mentioned, I told him to let me know if anything changed income wise or otherwise. And he said, I think it's going to be a pretty tight year. I don't see anything changing.
At any point, did you ever send any follow-up text to him about his dependence?
On March 12th, which would have been the next day when I let him know the rates, I just sent him a text message that said, all right, for a household of 3, this is what your rates are going to look like. This is what the insurance situation is.
Did you have any reason for sending that besides just letting him know what the rate would be?
Just to one final time make sure that there was no one else in the household we needed to count.
And what was his response?
He said, sounds good. That's great.
Now, going back to the life insurance, do you normally, is it one of your roles in the office to work with Tammy's employer relative to the life insurance planning?
Yes.
Okay. And what role do you play in that?
For her school district, I had done the presentation of the open enrollment presentation explaining the benefits, and I gave her life insurance election form. That was the extent.
What do you explain in that open enrollment process?
Just what the benefits look like for the upcoming contract year, health, life, disability, and we show them how to calculate how much life insurance they can elect voluntarily.
Excuse me. At any point in time when Chad had come into the office, did you ever notice anything that he was wearing?
Microphone, please.
Leading?
Overruled.
Yes.
What did you notice?
Uh, when he was in my office on November 21st and inquired to me about if he were to get married again, my eye was drawn to his wedding finger and I noticed he was wearing a ring. And I wondered if that was his ring from Tammy or if it was an engagement ring for the new wife.
Did you notice the color of the ring on that occasion?
Yes,
What was the color?
turquoise.
Did you happen to observe or notice what type of ring it was?
It just looked like a turquoise wedding ring.
Okay. Later on, at any point in time, did you ever observe him to be wearing any other type of ring?
Yes, when he was in my office on March 11th, first of all, he looked thinner and tanner. He looked quite happy, but his ring was black. It was different. And so my mind thought, okay, the turquoise one must have been from his marriage to Tammy, and this is his new one.
Your Honor, I don't have any more questions at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ballard. You had an occasion to be interviewed by Officer Mattingly, is that correct?
Yes,
And in reading that interview, I noted that you mentioned that one of the first times Chad approached you about insurance, he was referencing insurance for Seth, Leah, Mark, and just Chad. Is that correct?
yes,
And that was on the 31st of October?
yes,
Okay. And then it wasn't your unusual practice, but you helped the family with the Medicaid for Seth and Leah, if I remember. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay. So the initial request for insurance was just for his children that weren't covered, correct?
yes. The whole family was losing coverage that day because it was through Tammy previously.
Okay, through the employment, correct?
Correct, yes.
So the death of Tammy would cause a loss of coverage for the entire family, correct?
Yes,
Now, on the issue of the enrollment period, in regards to the school district, you mentioned that you went to the school and you put on a presentation. Is that correct?
yes,
And at that point, it was the teachers that were there and the librarian, and that you were presenting just to them. You weren't presenting to the entire family. Is that right?
right.
So at that point, if they were eligible, it would be the teacher's decision whether they would elect to increase or decrease their insurance, correct?
We give them a deadline of when the forms have to come back. It's very common for people to take those home and discuss them with their family.
Okay, good. And the enrollment period for the Sugar School District would have been when in September?
I think the forms were due back September 15th, and they would have been effective September 1.
And do you recall when you gave the presentation in September?
I gave it in August. It was August 23rd, 2019.
August 23rd?
That's my memory.
Now, were you aware of the fact that Daybell family had other insurance other than the insurance they were getting through Tammy?
As far, no,
No Primera, you weren't aware of the Primerica policy that Tammy and Chad had prior to the school district insurance?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is testifying.
Overruled.
And the base insurance for a first-year teacher is set at what with the school district?
I have no idea.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the cost is per unit of insurance to go up to the 80,000?
I can't think of the rate, but it goes 5 times your salary. So what she had elected ended up being 80,000.
And that's relatively inexpensive insurance. Would you agree?
Yes,
So it wouldn't be unusual if it's manageable to try to seek the maximum amount of insurance.
agreed.
Was there any discussion about other insurance options on Lori Vallow's other children?
No,
Was there ever any discussion that Lori Vallow's children were living somewhere else in the country?
Lori Vallow's children never came up.
And in any regard whatsoever?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pryor. Any redirect, Mr. Wixom?
Can I have just one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, at this time, we have no redirect.
Okay, that'll conclude the testimony then of Ms. Ballard. Is there any intention to recall her from the state?
Judge, at this point, the state's not prepared to release her from the subpoena.
Okay, so Ms. Ballard, that means that moving forward, you may be recalled to testify again in this case. And because of that, I'm going to admonish you not to watch any of the trial testimony that's continuing because it is available for the public to view. That way you will be able to not violate an exclusionary order, have an issue if you are recalled to testify since you're still under subpoena. So with that in mind, thank you for coming in and testifying today, and you can be excused.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me next ask the state then, given the time of the afternoon, is there another witness you wish to get started on, or would you request that we conclude for the day?
Your Honor, we do have another witness. However, they are going to be significantly longer than the 14 minutes that's left. It would be the state's preference if it's all right with the court to start that to finish up now. However, we will defer to the court.
Okay. Given the timing, I do think it just makes more sense to start off with a fresh witness and not break them up as they just get started in testimony. So I will go ahead and determine that we'll conclude for this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, again, thank you for always following the court's admonishment to not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else while we're on break until tomorrow. Please don't do anything to review or investigate the case. Avoid any media coverage you see of it to the best you can so that you can remain unbiased and only make your decisions on the facts you've heard here in court. So thank you for those in attendance today for complying with the court's conduct order as well. With that in mind, we'll be in recess starting again tomorrow morning at 8:30 with additional testimony.
All right, please.
Well, that was abrupt. Have a good night, and we will see you tomorrow morning.